Welcome back to ATEM Off-Road. In today's video, we're going to be installing the Rough Trail S.Y.E kit and a MP231J transfer case. We recently did a transfer case swap. Now we're going to be talking more specifically about the transfer case itself. Let me turn you around, show you some parts and materials. Let's get to work, guys. All right, so some tools that we're going to need. We're going to need some lock ring pliers, $15.99. You're going to definitely want to pick up some of these. Okay guys, so Dorman makes this O-ring kit. I use this red O-ring in the kit for that speed sensor on the housing. So anytime you remove that speed sensor, you're going to definitely want to replace. It's about $5.99 for a pack of O-rings. You get all of these, but we're only going to use that red one, and you're definitely going to want to replace that, because if you try to reuse the original O-ring, it could cause an oil leak after you get everything installed. Just a peace of mind, $6. Definitely recommend getting some new O-rings. So now we're here at the transmission fluid. We're going to use the ATF4. So you're going to want to pick up 2 quarts of these. That should be plenty. So I like to use this stuff. You're going to see me in the next take cleaning that transfer case. We're going to plug off all the holes, and I'm going to use this Purple Power. Works excellent for cleaning that transfer case. So guys, that's all we're going to need to complete this job. Let's get those stuff and get back to the house and start tearing apart that transfer case. The slip yoke eliminator kit that came with the Adams Driveshaft is by RT Off-Road. It's for 87 to 06 YJTJ and XJ with the NP231 transfer case. So I've already unboxed everything. Everything's right here. We're going to unpackage it and just talk a little bit about it. So this is your yoke flange here. I'm going to set all the parts out because we're going to be doing this right now, and I want to talk about stuff. So this looks like it's going to be the shaft. This is the main component that we're swapping out so we can get this stuff replaced. So packaging looks good. Good to go there. And then your shafting material here. Good. I'm gonna leave that right there and just kind of inspect this. Everything looks okay, I mean. And then we have our housing, shaft housing here. And I'm just looking at the bearings. Those feel really smooth. You have your seals. Everything's looking pretty good. Really nice housing here. All right, so I'm gonna go get the transfer case. I'm gonna move all this off to the side, and then we'll start opening up the transfer case. Transfer case is now done drying. We're gonna start removing all the plugs, everything that we use to seal off the transmission, make sure no water gets inside. But first I wanna remove this drive shaft. Basically, I'm just gonna take these pliers and pull this boot back and slip out the drive shaft. And we're not going to use this anymore. We're going to set this off to the side. So once you have the transfer case on the workbench, we'll go ahead and remove the oil plugs with the 30mm socket and drain all the oil out. So this dust cover is pressed on the shaft. We're going to take some heat and evenly apply it along the shafting of the dust cover. The heat helps expand the material so the dust cover can come off. Once the heat has been evenly applied, I'll take some chisels and some pry bars and go ahead and get behind it and just wiggle it right off the shaft. I noticed quickly that I wasn't going to be able to reuse this dust cover or the remaining seal of the housing. But that's going to be okay because we're going to replace all this anyway. So next I'm going to take a 1/2" wrench and remove the bolt and retainer for the speedometer sensor gear assembly and remove it. At this point, it's going to be a good idea to capture or take a picture of the location that it is setting in. In my case, it's pointed almost 12 o'clock. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove this thrust washer. I'm just going to get behind here with some screwdrivers, pry bars, and wiggle it off the shaft. You're going to take some pliers like this, and you're going to hook onto those. And there's a notch right here, kind of set it in the groove, and then spread it outward and pull forward. You can take like a pry bar and kind of pry it back, and it comes out just like this. And you'll remove the retaining ring. Just set that aside. Next, we're going to remove the 5 bolts that attaches the output shaft housing to the transfer case. Remove the end oil seal on the output shaft. Then remove the second lock ring that retains the output housing to the transfer case. And with an 1 1/8" socket and my impact driver, I'm going to buzz off the large nut attaching the yoke flange to the front output shaft of the transfer case. And that should come off just like that. I just hit it right here on this ear of the housing and then pried it at the same time. And it broke the housing and the seal, so it can come off like this. We'll just pull that off. I'm going to remove the oil pump housing from the output shaft. There's going to be an O-ring right here. Make sure you want to leave it inside the pump. Just going to set that off to the side. And then next we'll remove the 8 bolts that hold the 2 halves of the transfer case together. Right here is a pry bar location. See how I'm just prying it off. And then right here is another pry bar location. After you separate the case, remove any remaining sealant on the mating surfaces. Here I'm going to locate the oil pump pickup tube and clean the filter that collects up all the garbage in the pump. So you're going to definitely want to clean this up. Looks like it was picking up all of the RTV. So we'll go ahead and clean this tube out and this filter. But as you can see down in here, a lot of that excess RTV got into the pump and it started picking up right there. So this is a problem caused by putting too much RTV. You don't want to put too much RTV because it will get inside of your pump and start plugging things up, and that's never good, and you'll have a lack of lubrication and your transfer case can prematurely fail. So we're going to get this all cleaned up, get the pickup tube cleaned up. And right here is another example. There's a magnet right here. I'm going to lift that out. But as you can see, more of that RTV, and it looks like some kind of metal shavings or something. But the magnet, you want to clean this real good and then drop it back in. I'm going to leave it out for now. Now is a great time to look at any of the internals in the transfer case, like chains, wear strips, guides, things like that that's going to wear out. It'd be a great time to get that replaced before you go ahead and install it back in the Jeep. In my case, everything looked really good. Bearings looked good. I don't even think this Jeep went off-road. Next, we're going to remove the 2 output shafts and the chain all at the same time and set it right here on the bench. Once you have the rear output shaft on the bench, you can now remove the lock ring that holds the 2 sprockets in place. It might be helpful to use a flathead screwdriver in addition with your snap ring pliers to remove the lock ring from the shaft. Okay. Now you can begin reassembling the transfer case with your new parts. Slide the original sprockets on the new output shaft and replace the lock rings with the new lock rings that come in the kit. Double check that the lock ring seats in the groove of the new output shaft. Reinstall the output shaft to the chain, making sure that the chain is engaged to the sprocket. Next, reinstall both output shafts and the drive chain into the transfer case at the same time. Next, clean the magnet and install it back into the case half. A plastic gasket scraper and some Scotch-Brite pads work best to clean the case halves. I'm using Ultra Black Gasket Maker, which is oil resistant, Permatex part number 82180. Go ahead and take an 1/8 inch bead and go all the way around the case halves, making sure to go around the bolt holes. Reinstall the oil pickup tube and O-ring into the pump housing. And make sure to line up the transfer case oil filter. Next, while holding the oil pump in place, line up the case halves before pressing them together. They say that before you actually torque down the bolts, to let the RTV seat with the both mating halves and let the RTV dry for about an hour, then go through and bolt up all of your bolts. And you're going to want to bolt this up in a cross pattern. So while the RTV is drying for the hour, we can go ahead and install the speedometer gear. First, we're going to install the first lock ring, followed by the new speedometer gear that comes in the kit, and the second lock ring that retains the speedo gear on the shaft. Next, we'll reinstall all 8 of the case bolts and tighten them down in an alternating cross pattern. We're going to torque these bolts to 20 to 25 foot-pounds. Next, apply a little bit of ATF on the internal bearing of the output housing, and we'll go ahead and apply some RTV around the housing mating surface and surrounding the bolt holes. Then line up the output housing over the output shaft and press into place. After tightening the bolts part way to seat the sealant, we're going to wait an hour and then torque all bolts in an alternating pattern to 20 to 25 foot-pounds. And just do kind of like a cross pattern until all of these bolts, 10 millimeter bolts, are torqued to 25 foot-pounds. Lube up this O-ring right here, and I'm going to apply this plug to right here, and I'm going to tighten that down with the 18 millimeter socket. That's probably good right there. I'm going to take some of this transmission fluid and I'm going to lubricate the seal right here, and then I'm going to take some of the RTV and make another bead around here. Apply RTV to avoid any leaks on the splines all the way around. And then in the supplied kit you get this rubber gasket. I go ahead and set that over there like this, and then install the yoke flange and slip it through the seal here of the output housing. And then I'm going to apply the nut washer to the end of the shaft, and I'm going to torque it to 140 foot-pounds.
140.
I find that at this point, it's going to be a good time to fill up the transfer case. You can fill it up through this access hole where the speedometer gear is installed. It's recommended to wait 24 hours after the RTV has dried. So these two little fingers, they go on the body of this plastic body. You can see the notches right here and right here. So you just want to make sure it lines up inside the notches where mine does, and then it lines up with the bolt holes. So I'm going to have to turn mine just a little bit over till the hole lines up, and then put it, then you're going to bolt it up. After replacing the O-ring and lubricating it with ATF4, go ahead and set the assembly gear into the housing, reinstall the retainer and bolt, and as you tighten the bolt down, let the retainer press the assembly into the housing. Now working on the front output shaft, install the rubber gasket and apply a small bead of sealant. To avoid any leaks, install the yoke and the yoke nut and torque to 140 foot-pounds. So now the slip yoke eliminator kit has been totally installed. We're gonna let that silicone RTV dry overnight, and then we'll go ahead and stick this thing back in the Jeep and get the new drive shaft installed, and we'll be ready to hit the trails tomorrow. In the next video, you're gonna see us install this back into the Jeep. So there's going to be a part 2 where we remove and install this 231J transfer case in the Jeep Wrangler TJ, but that's going to cover pretty much all we need to do for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you like that video, hit the thumbs up, consider subscribing, helps out the channel, and we will see you on the next Jeep video, guys. Have a good day. Peace.